hospital, and the hospital staff, friends of mine, and two other professors constated or declared me dead.
The experience I am about to share is not some fairy tale or figment of imagination. It is my reality, an undeniable truth born from my own brush with death, a moment where I crossed into the unknown and came back to tell the tale. This is the extraordinary story of Georgy Rodonaia, a Soviet neuropathologist and staunch atheist, who lived through one of the longest recorded near-death experiences. In 1976, Georgy was struck by a car, leaving him unconscious and on the brink of death. Rushed to the intensive care unit, doctors fought tirelessly to stabilize him. Unfortunately, their efforts were in vain. Despite their best attempts, his vital signs flatlined, and with the certainty that no more could be done, the doctors declared him dead. But unbeknownst to them, Georgy's soul had not left this world. It was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about life and death. As Georgy later recounted, he didn't simply slip into oblivion. Instead, he entered a strange, unfamiliar realm, a place beyond the boundaries of time and space. He was aware of what was happening to his body, but he was no longer confined to it. From his vantage point above, he watched the doctors futilely attempt to revive him, their efforts failing. A wave of disbelief overtook him, and a single thought echoed in his mind. How can I still be here when my body is no longer alive? It was the first crack in his atheistic belief system, the moment when his unwavering faith in materialism began to shatter. But that was just the beginning. Georgy was suddenly transported to a completely different space, one where his senses were heightened in ways he couldn't have imagined. He found himself in the room of a neighbor who had recently given birth to a baby. The baby, however, was crying incessantly. The parents, frantic and unable to soothe the child, tried everything they could, but nothing worked. It was then that Georgy experienced something truly surreal. He somehow connected with the infant, not through words or physical gestures, but through a form of telepathic communication. Though unable to communicate directly with the parents, Georgy understood that the baby's cries were not merely due to hunger or discomfort. The infant was in pain, a pain that no one in the room seemed to understand or know how to alleviate. Georgy felt an overwhelming desire to help, but his efforts proved fruitless. Despite his best attempts to comfort the child, the connection seemed to be beyond the realm of his physical abilities. He was a ghostly figure, detached from the material world, trying desperately to bridge the gap between the realm of the living and the vast unknown. He then mentally willed himself back to the operating room where his lifeless body lay. He wished he could communicate with the doctors to let them know that he was not truly gone. But that wasn't possible. He was caught in a state of limbo, unable to return to his body in any meaningful way. As his thoughts raced, the darkness around him deepened. It was as though he had fallen into a deep, all-encompassing sleep. But it wasn't sleep. It was a state of isolation, a void where no time existed, where nothing could offer him comfort. The darkness was both suffocating and profound. Despite not being able to feel his body or perceive his surroundings in any conventional sense, Georgy was aware of his existence. It was a disorienting realization, but one that brought a strange clarity. He began to recall fragments of philosophy, ideas he had long dismissed in his rational mind, including the famous declaration, "I think, therefore I am." This thought became his anchor, a lifeline in the midst of overwhelming uncertainty. In that moment, he knew for certain that he still existed, even if he couldn't understand what was happening to him or why. It was a terrifying realization, yet it also offered a glimmer of hope. Georgy began to ponder the nature of his situation. Was this what death really was? An endless stretch of darkness? The unknown? He had no answers, only more questions. But in that darkness, he began to sense something that gave him comfort, a sense of a greater order, an interconnectedness to everything around him. Slowly, he came to understand that even in the darkest void, there must be light. Focusing on that light, Georgy began to witness something extraordinary. The darkness around him began to fade, like fog lifting from a sunrise. It was as if the very act of contemplating light brought it into being. And there it was, a brilliant, blinding light that filled the space, so intense that it seemed to pierce through his very soul. At first, the light was blinding, painful even, but as he allowed himself to adjust, it became clear that this wasn't just a physical light. It was something more. It was the light of understanding, of clarity, of the divine. The darkness had been replaced with an overwhelming sense of peace and warmth. It was as though the light was not just illuminating the space around him, but also his soul, helping him make sense of the chaos that had once been his life. As the light expanded, Georgie began to realize that the space around him was composed of countless particles. At first they appeared random and chaotic, but then something miraculous occurred. The particles began to move in perfect harmony, as if they were part of a grand design, one that he could now understand. What had once seemed like disorder was, in fact, the most profound order he could ever imagine. This was no mere coincidence. It was the very fabric of the universe, vibrating with purpose. In that moment, Georgie felt a profound sense of awe. He was no longer an atheist, no longer bound by the cold, materialist worldview that had once governed his thinking. What he had experienced wasn't just a vision, it was the truth. He realized that the afterlife was not some vague concept or distant possibility. It was as real and as tangible as life itself. Death was not an end, but a continuation, an evolution of the soul into a higher plane of existence. But just as Georgie began to come to terms with this higher understanding, something even more extraordinary occurred. While his soul lingered in this otherworldly realm, his physical body had been taken to the morgue for an autopsy. The pathologist, unaware of Georgie's miraculous state, made an incision into his chest, preparing for the examination. At that very moment, Georgie's eyes snapped open. Initially, the pathologist thought it was a reflex, a mere twitch, and continued with his work. But then something more astonishing happened. Georgie's pupils responded to light. His body, once declared dead, was now exhibiting signs of life. The doctor, shocked and confused, rushed to revive Georgie. He performed CPR, and slowly, miraculously, Georgie began to breathe again. His heart started beating, and the doctors were left, speechless, unable to comprehend how a man who had been dead for so long could now be alive. The mystery of his revival left the medical staff baffled, but Georgie, though still weak, knew the truth. He had returned from the brink of death, having witnessed the other side. As Georgie slowly recovered, both physically and mentally, he underwent a profound transformation. The man who had once placed all his faith in science and reason had now become a believer, not in any particular religion or dogma, but in the boundless power of love and the afterlife. He abandoned his medical career and chose instead to devote himself to spiritual growth. He became a priest, not to preach religious doctrine, but to share his personal experience of clinical death and the lessons he had learned. In his new role, Georgie spoke of the true purpose of life, to love. Love for people, love for nature, love for the very creation that surrounds us. He explained that life was not about accumulating wealth or power, but about building connections and leaving a positive impact on the world. He also shared the profound truth he had come to understand about the afterlife, that it is not a distant, intangible concept, but an integral part of existence. Those who live with love and kindness will continue to evolve in higher realms, while those who live with malice and selfishness will find themselves trapped in darker corners of the afterlife. Georgie's near-death experience lasted for 2 full days, a duration that remains one of the longest on record. His journey into the afterlife, his return, and the revelations he experienced offer a powerful challenge to the conventional understanding of life and death. His story is not just a fascinating tale. It is a profound testament to the mysteries of the human soul and the boundless potential that lies beyond this life. Georgie's transformation, his experiences, and the insights he gained continue to inspire and challenge those who hear his story. It invites us all to reflect on the deeper meaning of life, to question our assumptions about death, and to open ourselves to the possibility of something greater than we can fully comprehend. If you have been moved by Georgie's story, or if you have your own thoughts on life, death, and the afterlife, please feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated on more incredible stories and life-changing experiences.